At long last, the moment we've all been waiting for has arrived. The new season of the beloved superhero series, The Boys, is finally here. With Season 4, the show has already hinted at some significant characters making their debut, and some mention of possible events. Apart from these details, the first 3 episodes already showed us some of the craziest moments we could have expected in the series. However, the character with mixed feelings toward him, Billy Butcher, will now focus on returning his stepson from Homelander. In the process, he reveals details regarding his brother Lenny, who also had a significant appearance in the previous season. Since we've already met many of his family members, let's get some deets on these people and explore our anti-hero character from the series. After all, there's a chance that some of these people might be responsible for making him the mess of a human being he has become. Before we get into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Who is Billy Butcher? Before we delve into his family, let's take a moment to understand the enigma that is Butcher. Although this character's comic book and series versions are unique, they share some intriguing similarities. William Butcher is the leader of the vigilante group, codenamed The Boys, dedicated to taking down Vought and stopping the Seven by any means necessary. Butcher is an ex-Marine with a troubled childhood that somewhat affected his personality and made him the person he is today. Apart from taking down the Supes of Vought, he has a personal issue with Homelander and is hell-bent on taking him out. What drives him to this unstoppable force is a pretty tragic event in his life, which we'll discuss in detail when we meet the other people who are related to him. But enough events surrounding him make him crazy to kill the Supes and take revenge. While Karl Urban's take on the character from the series has enough reasons to get hate because of his anti-hero behavior, it's surprisingly toned down compared to the series. While the series shows that Butcher is aware of how crazy his actions are at times, the comic book never indicates him becoming aware of the slippery slope he landed on until the end, when he commits genocide. Oops, spoilers. However, the comic books have a completely different narrative that would have psychologically impacted people if they'd been adapted honestly into the series. Did you know that Butcher always had powers in the comic books? You should read the comic books, they're in a league of their own. Now that we know about the infamous Billy Butcher, let's meet his family.
Oh, you're welcome.
Sam Butcher, father. The first person we'll talk about is Samuel Butcher, who might be replicating tragically for the character. Samuel Butcher is Billy's less than ideal father, and you might not like him if you don't particularly like Butcher himself. Now, Samuel was a drunkard and abusive to his 2 sons, Billy and Lenny, and his justification for the abuse was to toughen them up for the world, but it only made things worse for the 2 kids as they grew up in the abuse, trying to escape the entire ordeal but failing in a million ways. While Billy managed to escape from his home, Lenny had to stay around, but eventually ended up killing himself because of the abuse. Butcher blamed his father for Lenny's death, while Sam blamed Billy for abandoning Lenny, and this further strained the relationship between the 2. Sam does make an appearance in the 2nd season of the series, when we find out that he has cancer, and Butcher's mother calls him in. The confrontation between Sam and Billy is relatively poor, even though Sam credits himself for making a tough man out of Billy. Later, Sam runs off from his residence, and it is assumed that he's dead. Later in Season 3, Billy talks about him during his interaction with Soldier Boy. When Soldier Boy asks if Sam is alive, Billy mentions that if he isn't dead from cancer, then he's probably shitting his guts out. There are no other mentions of the character in the series yet, and we can assume that he's passed away. Now, the comic book takes an entirely different approach to the character, and here, we hardly get to see an interaction between Billy and Sam. The only interaction we see is when Billy has a complete conversation with Sam's corpse, where we get to see his whole story, and it ends with him urinating on the corpse. Billy has a tragic past, and we get a better idea of him when we see his relationship with his father. Did you know that the actor John Noble played Sam Butcher in the series? This is quite a cheeky reference to the idea of a reunion between Denethor and Eomer.
When you saw how helpless he is now,
Connie Butcher, mother. Billy's mom, Connie Butcher, didn't have a significant appearance in the show, even though she attempted a possible separation between the father and son. Even though much isn't indicated about her character in the series, the comic book does suggest that she also had her part in suffering along with her sons. Sam continuously beat her, and she often ended up sustaining some severe injuries. One time, it gotten so bad that Sam partially blinded her, and Billy couldn't stand it. He stood up against his father, but Lenny stopped him. Later, when Billy married Becca, she was the only one who convinced Connie to leave Sam, and thus get out of the sad life she'd been living. She ends up getting a happy ending with her new husband, and Billy's quite proud that she had the chance to be happier with her present husband than the miserable time with his father. In the series, she attempts to bring Billy and Sam together by lying to Billy that his father had passed away. Even though it convinces him to come and see her, and he sees his father, it only affects Billy and worsens his relationship with his father. If there's any humanity in Billy, that's because of his mother. Luckily, of all the people in Billy's family tree, she might be the only one with a happy ending after years of suffering. Lenny Butcher, Brother. In the latest episode of Season 4, we'll keep the red flag flying here. Billy tries to reconnect with Ryan by playing foosball. In the process, he talks about his brother Lenny, with whom he used to play the game at the local pub, while their father got drunk. He used to let him win. There are moments throughout the series where we hear Lenny mentioned, which indicates that what happened to Lenny significantly impacted Billy. Lenny was Billy's younger brother, and the two siblings got their share of horrible abuse under their father. While Lenny never fought back, Billy had often almost jumped back at their father. On one particular occasion, he nearly attacked him, when he ended up beating their mother quite severely. Later, Billy told Lenny that he intended to join the Marines and would eventually do so, but he failed to return. Eventually, Lenny ended up committing suicide by shooting himself in the head, but the comic book showed that Lenny died after he was hit by a bus, and the fact that his father didn't come to his funeral did have an effect on Billy. Even though the blame for this majorly goes to his father, some part of Billy blames himself because there are times when Billy gets hallucinations of his brother. It might sound weird, but now there's another character of whom Billy hallucinates, and we'll mention her soon. In the series, Lenny appears in the 3rd season, warning Butcher about taking the Temp V as a hallucination on the television. He tries to stop her by mentioning what Becca would think of it. However, a significant appearance from Lenny happens at a moment in Billy's childhood when Mindstorm puts Billy in a catatonic state after he's incapacitated due to an explosion. Here we get to see moments from Billy's childhood, when Billy was trying to repeat his father's actions while Lenny wanted to stop him. One time, Billy addressed Lenny as a poof, just like his father did, and it won't be long after that he would commit suicide. Lenny is the complete opposite of Billy, and it goes to show how differently their father's abuse affected them. But what happened to Lenny seriously impacts Billy, because there are times in the series when we see that Billy does regret Lenny's death. When Billy and Huey are in Russia to investigate Soldier Boy, Billy briefly sees Huey as Lenny when Huey is vomiting due to the side effects of taking the Temp V. So there's a clear indication that Huey does resemble Lenny in various aspects, and even Billy treats him like a younger sibling.
I like your friends. Especially Huey. He's,
Becky Saunders, comics, Becca Butcher, series, wife. Now that we've dealt with some characters who contributed to Billy's traumatic childhood, let's meet someone associated with something that would be the final nail in the coffin of the idea of Billy Butcher's sweet life. Even after all the trouble in his childhood, Billy did end up falling in love with Becky Saunders and even married her. Even though the two had hoped for a better life, things would turn awry soon, and the result gave us the Butcher we know. In the series, Becca works for Vought, and after working there for several years, she disappears one fine day on the 24th of January 2012. Billy assumes that she died, and later, when he's informed that she was last seen with Homelander, he develops a complete hatred for him for raping her. But the comics had a different fate for her, which was much more brutal than we imagined. Becky was a social worker, and she and Billy had a meeting, during which they fell for each other. Even though the series indicates that Billy had changed his ways after marriage, the comics suggested that he continued his violent outburst after marrying her, which she could tolerate. But one day, Black Noir, disguised as Homelander, went and raped Becky, and the trauma was something that drew her away from Billy. A few months later, she ended up giving premature birth to a superpowered fetus that ripped out of her womb, killing her in the process. The fetus targeted Billy, and hence, he had to beat it to death with a lampstand while his wife lay dead next to him. Luckily, Becca in the series had a better fate, as she reached out to Vought about what had happened to her and told them about the child she was about to give birth to. Vought made her sign documents that prevented her from sharing any of the details with anyone else, and they made her undergo the procedure for the delivery of her child. For 8 years, Becca was kept in isolation, away from Homelander and Billy, raising her son Ryan secretly. But eventually, both Homelander and Billy find out that she's alive and raising her children in isolation. While Homelander visits her, he indicates that he wants to raise their child as a Supe, which Becca opposes. Meanwhile, Billy arrives to take her away, but Becca denies it, as she wants to prevent Vought from raising her son like the monstrous being that is Homelander. As Homelander and Stormfront convince Ryan that his mother has lied to her, they take him along. Finally, Becca seeks help from Billy, and Billy manages to extract Ryan, but Stormfront gives them a chase. As she tries to take Ryan away, Becca manages to stab her in the eye socket with a knife, giving her a permanent injury. Stormfront starts choking her to death, but before Stormfront can go through with it, Ryan, who was asking her to stop, uses his heat vision on her, and this burns her up almost entirely. But at the same time, Becca also gets injured as she receives a significant cut on her neck that starts seeping out excess amounts of blood. As Ryan cries for forgiveness, Becca makes Billy promise that he will assure Ryan that it wasn't his fault and that he'll care for Ryan. Becca dies due to excess blood loss, and the only thing about her that is left in the process is Ryan, someone Billy couldn't stand at this point. Just like Lenny, Becca also appears as a hallucination to Billy in the latest season, as he's in serious trouble with his cancer. She confronts Billy for failing to protect Ryan from Homelander, considering Ryan has completely taken sides with him, and Becca will continue to appear for a while as Billy tries to reconnect with Ryan this season. Becca was the only person who positively impacted Billy's life, but what happened to her only made Billy return to the ways his father became proud of. It's no wonder Billy's a messed up character. He's had enough trouble to drive him nuts for the rest of his life.
Ryan, let go.
No! You said you'd always watch out for me! You promised!
Ryan Butcher, stepson. Ryan Butcher is an original character created for the series, considering the fetus was killed by Billy in the comics right when it was born prematurely. The series finds his character, and he has a significant role, considering he's exceptional in the idea of the Supes. He's the illegitimate son of Homelander, and this is the first scenario in which a child has been born with powers and was not given any of the compounds from Vought. He's first introduced when Homelander takes Butcher to the isolated place where his mother raised him. In Season 1, during an argument at Madeline Stillwell's, Homelander takes the opportunity to pick Butcher and drop him right at Becca's porch. There we see Ryan coming out of the house, only to be told by Homelander that he is his father. Right then, we witness Ryan's powers for the first time, as he reacts to the information by almost activating his heat vision. In the second season, we get to see how Homelander intends to raise Ryan like a Supe, and since Becca opposes this, the two get into an altercation about it. Later, Homelander and Stormfront convince him to take their side and get away with him. In the process of getting him away from Stormfront, Becca loses her life when Ryan accidentally kills her in an outburst to stop Stormfront. After this, Butcher fulfills the promise he made to Becca and tries to bond with Ryan. But the fact that he killed Becca bothers him. Ryan is kept in a safe house with Grace Mallory for a year, and Billy almost visits him regularly. But then Billy has an outburst in front of the kid when he reminds him that he's killed Becca. Meanwhile, Homelander uses this opportunity to bond with him, and he becomes the only person he can talk to after the poor treatment he receives from Billy. Homelander takes him to Vought Tower to proceed with his plan of bonding with Soldier Boy by introducing Ryan as his grandson. Billy, who was present there with Soldier Boy, is shocked to see Ryan. At the same time, Soldier Boy states that Homelander is a disappointment, clearly repeating his daddy issues to his biological child. Ryan tries to stop the individuals from fighting and uses his heat vision again, which throws off Soldier Boy. Soldier Boy decides to go up against Ryan, and this is the first time we see Homelander and Billy team up against the Supe. They continue attacking Soldier Boy until the very end, when Queen Maeve arrives at the scene and manages to knock him out. Homelander gets away with Ryan in the end. Later, during a protest, a Starlight follower throws something at Homelander, which instead ends up hitting Ryan, to which Homelander shoots lasers right at his head, killing him on the spot, and the crowd cheers for his behavior. In the new season, Ryan will have a crucial role to play, considering Billy is seen trying to bond with him. After finding out that Billy has cancer, Ryan grows a soft spot for him and reacts in a much softer way. Meanwhile, Homelander wants to work on Ryan's superhero figure as he gets him his first orchestrated superhero moment of saving a child. Still, Ryan pushes the fake criminal too hard, splashing him onto a building. The scary aspect is that this was the very thing that Becca wanted to prevent from happening, but Billy was too late to do anything about it. Later, Billy invites him to chat, and bonds with him quite well, and addresses everything that has gone wrong so far. When Ryan returns home, Homelander realizes that he's gone to Billy and freaks out on him. Ryan runs off. There's a chance that Ryan can still be saved and prevented from being turned into an individual like Homelander, but for that to happen, Billy has to play his cards right, get along with him, and make him realize that he's also Becca's child, who didn't bring him up for this fate. The presence of Ryan is a significant difference between Billy's arc in the comics and the series, as the comic book version of Billy would have never bonded with Ryan, and probably would have killed him when he got the chance. Judith Atkinson, series, Aunt. Now that we're done with some of the significant characters in Butcher's life, we're left with other family members with a tiny role to play in the series. Judith Atkinson appears in the series' second season, when Butcher goes to her place to disappear and hide from Vought. This character was initially created for the series, and she's also the caretaker of Terror, who should have his mention in Butcher's family tree based on his comic book arc. As Billy is hiding at her place, his friends arrive to bring him back to continue with their mission, and this is when Black Noir also pops up at her place. However, Judy saves Billy and his friends by putting them in the basement, while Black Noir destroys the house. Later, Billy convinces Stan Edgar to negotiate for their lives and saves Judy from any future interruptions by the Supes. Even though she's the only family member who plays a significant role in the series, we witness he has a special bond with her. For someone with such a tragic family, he's lucky to have an aunt who's probably the coolest.
My mom's getting old. She just wants a place to talk to her daughter.
Rachel Saunders, sister-in-law. Rachel Saunders was also mentioned in the comic books, but never appeared. Rachel is Becca's sister, who along with her mother, thought that Becca was dead after she disappeared for 8 years. The mother-sister duo got a gravestone just so they could talk to her at a gravesite, but Butcher never really approved of this. In the comics, she's mentioned when Butcher wants to tell her about Becca, while Greg Mallory recruits him. Surrogate brothers. As the Fast and the Furious films have taught us, there's more than friendship when it comes to the people surrounding you. They often end up becoming family, and in the case of Butcher, there's a certain number of people who surround him all the time. While they are a family, only one stands out as a family member who better understands Billy's tragedy. Mother's Milk is the only one of Billy's colleagues who understands Billy as a father, and the two share an interesting bond.
Yeah, ain't that what your wife said?
Mother's Milk, Comics: Surrogate Brother. The comic book version of Mother's Milk was a close friend of Butcher, and the two greatly respect each other. But the series fans might be surprised that Mother's Milk is the only character born with Compound V in his blood. There are a lot of questions associated with the character, and one of the major ones is why he's named Mother's Milk. While the series never gives a clear explanation, the comic book explains that it's because of his dependency on his mother's breast milk, something he cannot survive without consuming periodically. He had to leave the team early on to take care of his daughter because his mother was a drug addict. Mother's Milk also had a brother who died quite early on when his powers manifested, because he continued to expand in size. Later, their father took this matter to court and pursued legal action, but ended up dead after winning only one of the court cases. One thing that strikes common ground between the two interpretations of the character in the comic book and the series is that he's a good investigator. But unlike his comic book rendition, MM doesn't jive that well with Butcher, and the two bump heads quite often. While he had left Butcher's group earlier, he rejoined them later, but this would sacrifice his relationship with his family as his wife separated with him. But again, the one thing that strikes a similar tone to that of the comic books is that MM manages to rekindle his relationship with his daughter, after he tells her about his past and how her grandfather fought for the justice of humans. Still, then he was killed by Soldier Boy. Even though MM and Butcher's relationship might seem troublesome in the series, the two have a solid, unspoken bond, which is one of the critical elements of the boys' functionality. Janine Wallace, Comics: Surrogate Niece. When one notices the similarities between MM and Billy, an exciting parallel emerges. While Billy tries to manage his stepson in the series, MM has a daughter with whom his relationship was strained when he joined the boys. Even though Janine Wallace had a different interpretation of the comic books and the series, MM still has to do a lot to maintain stability in their relationship. We get to see MM sitting down with her and explaining his troubled relationship with the Supes at the end of the 3rd season, which puts him as her favorite person in the world. The fact that she had an obsession with the Supes affected him, and he tried to keep her away from the Supes while her stepfather used to bring her to the superhero conventions. Although we don't see any developments between Butcher and Janine in the series, except that he cares for her safety even though her mother hates him. In the comic books, he goes against her when she manages to trouble him. Butcher even kills her mother when the situation reaches circumstances where he wants to look out for the sake of MM. Marvelous Verdict. Going through Billy Butcher's family tree gives us a lot of insight into Butcher himself and explains his behavior. In various ways, the people surrounding him play a significant role in his life, and often, he replicates his behavior with them based on past relationships. This particular thing could be explained based on his relationship with Huey, whom he treats like his brother. Very minor elements added to Butcher's character immediately make him very different from the comic book. It's interesting to see Butcher navigating an anti-hero arc rather than the pure villain one from the comic books. It only makes the series more exciting, because we don't know how he will save Ryan, even though he's almost dead. Butcher makes it into the list of the craziest characters that we've had the chance to see in the world of comic book adaptations, thanks to Carl Urban's absolute dedication to the character. If you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone!